Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the EV portion. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome, everybody.
One of the first things we wanted to share with you was the event that took place this weekend in Phoenix at a Martin Auto Museum. And I was aware of this for a couple decades or so. It was much smaller than the event and the building that they currently have. It's almost the size of a Costco, those of you familiar with the amount of square footage in a Costco. The plan was with this show to invite the EV group, local EV group, because the museum just picked up a Tesla Model S. And it wasn't just any Tesla Model S. It was one that sold at Peterson Auto Museum about 3 months ago or so from a donation from a wealthy benefactor. And a local customer bought it for $20,000.
Wow.
Which, yeah, even for a 2012 Model S is a pretty good deal, right? But this one happened to be a signature car, and it was VIN number 8. So a future collectible in every way that you look at it. So it had an air conditioning problem. The car came to our shop. And he also put window tint on it. It's a black car. In fact, we have a picture of it here, Jesse. If you want to bring up VIN 8-2, you'll see it sitting at this museum. And it's sitting there proudly displayed in amongst all of the other ICE vehicles from the last century to this century. One final thing that we were contracted to do was to disable the high voltage battery pack, the 12-volt system, so that it just sits there and looks pretty without any kind of need for charging or maintenance or anything. And there you have it.
Pete, can you pull your mic up a little bit?
Sure. What you're seeing there is 21-inch wheels. You're seeing some window tint, 2012, immaculately taken care of. And it was a screaming deal at $20K at Peterson. The customer put another 7 to 8 into it by the time he was done. But so anyway, because the Martin Auto Museum has this EV, they decided to invite the local EV group, and we brought a Tesla Roadster, of course, the only one there, which is not unusual.
Sure.
And we got a private tour, a personal tour through the facility. There was a big car show outside, just bunches of ICE vehicles, hot rods, muscle cars, that sort of thing. And for about 45 minutes, one of the board members took the EV group, about 30 of us, through this facility. And what we began to realize, this is a gem. This is kind of like Peterson, except not in California. And it is well worth attending. The price is $15 general admission, and kids under 5 are free. Kids between 6 to 12 are $5, and seniors, if you're 62 plus, are only $12. So, but again, it was extremely well attended, and we were impressed just looking at some of these cars that were there. There was everything from the 1920s, 30s, up through the muscle car era, and some very unusual pedigree cars. One of the cars had 6 miles on the odometer. It was one of the Shelby Cobras. There was a popcorn wagon that basically was a wooden food truck.
Okay.
With enormous amounts of glass and decals on the ceiling. Extremely well done. And it was just recently purchased within the last couple of weeks. But they even have a carousel inside for the kids. One of the old merry-go-round style things. They have about 5 banquet rooms. One is as large as 12,000 feet. So if you want to do your wedding here or you want an event here, all of that is available at this museum. It's not too far from us. It's over on Thunderbird, 43rd Avenue and Thunderbird Road. And they are open 5 days, 6 days a week, including Saturday, I believe. So for those of you interested, Google it, look it up. It is called the Martin Auto Museum. One final note here is the owner of this is Mel Martin. And 25 years ago or so, I had some muscle cars that I had restored. I had no room for them. And I called Mel and I said, look, I know you've got a museum. I would be willing to just give you my cars to store them because they're sitting undercover outside. I have a 2-car garage and always have had, right?
Right.
And he said, Pete, I just don't have the room. This was 25 years ago. But Mel now is 94 years old. God bless him, still going strong, loves what he does, and is, giving back to the automotive community. He's an inspiration.
He really is. And the museum is a fantastic museum. I've been there before. I did not go there more recently. I look forward to going there again sometime soon.
Mm-hmm. Great place to take the kids to if you have children, not only because of the merry-go-round, but if your kids are like mine, they love cars, and this is the place to be. All right. We've got some questions coming in here.
Yes, we have Wayne Levitt on YouTube. It says, looking forward to hearing this. Welcome. Glad to have you on this morning, Wayne. And on Instagram, Yitz1 waves to us and says, good morning.
Morning.
And then on Instagram, Klaus Hein says, moin moin. It's Frisian. And it means hi there.
Oh, it's a language in the Netherlands. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. And, for those of you thinking about commenting, please do, and let us know where you're coming in from. I find that we have a much larger audience than typically comments on these podcasts.
Yes.
And the reason I know that, as I was walking around the Martin Auto Museum, invariably people would come up to me, introduce themselves, and I would say, I'm Pete Gruber, and their comment was, I know, I watch all your podcasts. So, yeah, feel free to join and comment. These are collaborative podcasts, typically. All right, so we've got another article here, and this one is from Autocar. And the headline on this is, there's never been a better time to buy a used EV as prices now dip below ICE cars. And my answer to that is, could this be that turning point that we've been waiting for, the tipping point?
I tell you, I really hope so. In addition to the Autocar, I wanted to see if there were other articles out there that were talking about this. Forbes had a good one, posted June 20th. And they said, yeah, the average price of used electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles, has now dropped below the price of used gas-powered vehicles. And it continues to drop. In May, it was $200 difference, so they were basically the same. In June, it was almost 8% less. And they projected it in July, EVs would even be less. And that's without the $4,000 federal subsidy that you get for buying an electric vehicle from a dealer.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, I think this is going to help accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles in the U.S. with or without government subsidies.
Yeah.
Your skeptics, the people who are, or rather the people who are pragmatists, they're not going to buy an electric vehicle because it's electric. They're going to buy an electric vehicle because it's 20% less than a comparable gas vehicle.
Yeah. Or there's certain stigmas and fears. I don't have a charging system at my home. Well, that's not a very expensive proposition to put in. And, then, of course, the charging infrastructure, and then the fears about, will the utilities be able to keep up with all of this demand from electric vehicles?
Yeah.
And we've done a number of videos there, and the grid is quite capable of handling this influx and has been quite well.
As soon as people realize that many of these myths that are being propagated about electric vehicles are not true, there'll be a percentage of those pragmatists that become EV enthusiasts, because they'll see, like my son did, he bought an electric Tesla used, spent $20,000 for it. We facilitated it through here at Gruber Motors, and he did it because, goodness sakes, it saves him about $400 a month on gasoline charges.
And we're not even yet talking about the lowered maintenance. KISS oil changes, goodbye. KISS tune-ups, goodbye. Exhaust issues, going to the emissions facilities if your state requires that, which is a royal pain. Here in Arizona, all right, picture this. It's the middle of July. It's 115 out. you have to take your car to an emission facility, which is nothing more than a building with an input and output unair conditioned. They might have some fans, and you're sitting there idling in this heat, waiting for your turn, making your emissions a whole lot worse by the time you get there,
Oh,
right?
yes.
Now you're inside, and all you're smelling is emissions fumes, the oppressive heat, and that half-hour wait that it took you to get through that line. And you have to do that once a year. All of that goes away with electric vehicles because we have zero emissions, none at all. So we're putting the state emissions board out of business eventually.
Exactly. And you'll never, ever have to worry about somebody crawling up under your car, under your driveway on a Friday night and stealing your catalytic converter.
That's a whole nother benefit I hadn't even considered. Yep, good point. Instagram, EV Smoke ATX, welcome back. He says, Austin, Texas, always showing EV love to all.
Thank you.
Your state has made a hefty commitment to EVs with Elon relocating from California to Austin. So another headline here, this is regarding the Tesla diner in Hollywood that's under construction. And we're pretty excited about that because we feel that this could be the future of what we used to call gas stations, fueling stations, or in this case, charging stations. Apparently, there's some footage, drone footage now, and you can Google this, showing the progress of this building starting to take shape. And what the question is, are the panels on the building sides Cybertruck vintage stainless steel? And it's certainly beginning to look like they are polished steel siding panels on the first floor. So if any of you have more information about that, we'd certainly like to get some more details about that.
I found a couple pictures of that were taken fairly recently too. So if Jesse would want to bring up the Tesla diner, supercharger, Cybertruck inspired, it ends in a -2, and then there's the -4. Both of those are pretty good pictures, although they came out a little bit dark on our screen. And they definitely are some sort of steel or stainless steel panels on them.
Oh yeah, look at the gleam, the shine.
Yeah, you can see the shine there on that. It's really pretty evening picture. There was this is from Teslarati. There's also a drone footage video about 2 minutes long on the Teslarati article, and it gives you an even better view of the gleam of that. So yes, this is a little darker than I would have wanted, but it does show that it's definitely a stainless steel motif instead of the red and white and pink and type of motif.
Or stucco.
Yes.
Very nice. Have another article here, and this one talks about Tata, which is an Indian company. And this vehicle's been around for a while, but the headline here was that the Tata Nano, manufactured by Indian automotive giant Tata Motors, is the world's cheapest car. And a little bit of research here discloses, man, is this thing cheap. They're no longer making this particular version. It came out in 2008, but it had a starting price of 100,000 rupees, which sounds like a lot, doesn't it?
Oh, you'd think so. 100,000 rupees. Okay, well, how much is a rupee?
Well, let's apply an exchange rate. 100,000 rupees is about $1,500. So this is definitely an inexpensive car. It did go up a bit after it was produced and released. But the specs on this are, it's not an EV, first of all. It is a two-cylinder car with a 624cc rear-mounted petrol engine that produces a whopping 37 horsepower. It had 4 seats, though, and it came with either a 5-speed manual or a 5-speed automatic transmission. Some say that the Nano had light power steering and an openable tailgate and a bigger fuel tank, but others noted that it had a bumpy ride quality and substandard plastic parts. The Nano was also plagued, they say, with production issues, poor safety, and dismal crash test results. Well, remember, folks, this is a $1,500, maybe $2,000 car. What do you expect?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the whole thing about this particular car is it's cheap.
Yeah, very, very cheap. In a country where there isn't a gigantic middle class, so it's a proper place to be manufacturing something like this. until, of course, the EV mandates take hold or the restrictions for manufacturing ICE vehicles.
Now, Tata still has some of the cheapest cars in the world. They've got their Tiago that's $6,500 today. It's still in production. But I think the Wuling Mini EV is the current leader. So it's an electric vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go as low as $2,850
For an EV.
for an electric vehicle.
Wow.
But you have to get the $2,850. You're going to have to pay a $29 fee per month for 5 years for it. But it's it only seats 2 people. Electric motor delivers 27 horsepower, 63 foot-pounds of torque. So very small, but it gets you between 75 and 100 miles. That's there are some very, very small and cheap cars out there still. And of course, this car is sold in China.
Mm-hmm. Interesting question there is, in order to protect the U.S. auto manufacturers, what kind of a tariff do you think the U.S. government would place on a car that costs this little? 2,000% maybe? Or
They would want to, yes. I think what they would do in that case would simply be to take that particular car and say, "Oh no, we can't. It's not safe enough for U.S. standards."
Yeah. Hey, it looks like Justin is joining us, Bearded Tesla, coming in from X. Welcome. He says, "What could be better than Tesla burgers and fries?" You're right. Yep. And a movie theater. Remember, they have a big screen there, 2 of them that they're going to do visual stuff with.
Yeah.
He also says, "What do people expect from a $1,500 car? I will complain about." We'll complain about anything, right?
Oh, sure they will. I'm sure they will. That's. And then Wayne Levitt also on YouTube says, "What about them unbolting the titanium bash plate on my Model S?"
It looks easy, he says.
Says it looks easy. He's thinking about the Milliways, the restaurant, with all the. Is it steel or is it titanium?
Right. Okay. Good point. All right. So another interesting statistic here in Norway, which is a country that is well known for its rapid adoption of electric vehicles and support of sustainable energy. Apparently, electric vehicles have now taken 94.3% of the share in Norway. It's a new record high. They were already way up there, and it was 89.9% a year ago, and now it's gone to 94.3%. I think these guys are going to get rid of all of their ICE cars here fairly quickly.
I think they are. And what I noticed too, when you look at the graph, do we have a picture of that graph?
I don't have it on this section.
Okay, then I'll just mention it. Diesel at 2.5%. Hybrid electric vehicles. So that's your gas electric hybrid was 2.9%. Plug-in hybrids was 2.4%. That means gasoline vehicles, petrol powered as they would call it, didn't make it onto the graph.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I thought that was really interesting to see that regular, what we call regular gas vehicles here in the States didn't even make it on. And Norway's not the only country that's really ramping up the adoption rate.
Yeah.
Although they lead. When I saw that Norway's 95% meant 6,500 registrations, I thought, okay, well, that's probably smaller than what we have in Maricopa County in Arizona. So maybe not as impactful worldwide. Similarly, Iceland, small country, but they're at 41%.
Yeah.
And then you look at some Sweden at 60%. That's a little bit bigger. More people in Sweden. Netherlands, 30%. Small country, densely populated. And then UK and France, 2 of the big Europe superpowers, or the Europe powers, I guess you would call it, 25% each. Yeah. France is still committed to no petrol-powered vehicles by 2030. And then the biggest market is still China. In 2023, China had 60% of worldwide registrations. And so they're growing quickly, although their percentages aren't up here yet.
As Bearded Tesla will attest, we were in Austria together in May of this year. And personally, we usually go there. My family goes there every couple of years, but because of COVID, it had been 5 or 6 years since we were in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And what amazed me was 5, 6, 7 years ago, you wouldn't see a Tesla or an EV on the road. But this time around, they were omnipresent. It was almost like being in California or Phoenix, and I think Giga Berlin has a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
But for those of you that haven't been there much, there is definitely a visible change that's occurring in Europe for EV adoption.
It definitely is. Germany has the most of Western Europe countries, has the largest car market. And I didn't mention them on here, but they're up around 17% of registrations being EVs. So you think about that. 1 out of every 5 cars on the road almost in Germany, where they have 80 million, 90 million people, is now an EV.
Yeah.
Wow.
Substantial. Yeah. Bearded Tesla's also chiming in. He says, we've gotten too far away from the basics, unfortunately. So we have all these minimum features. I guess now that I think about it, it's time to text drive and manually roll down the windows. Okay.
Yeah, I think I had one of those, Armstrong power steering and manual windows, and I always called it Armstrong because when you don't have power steering, whatever power you get in your arms is the power that you have for steering.
Yeah. Or try doing that in the winter after an ice storm or something.
Oh, yes.
Instagram, KWH Motors. Love all the content Gruber Motors creates and provide for all of us EV lovers. Off-topic question. Is it verified that the Tesla Roadster 2 will have the SpaceX option, being able to fly? We were going to report on that, but we did last week. Elon keeps on mentioning it. He's in a tough spot. He had a supercar about 6, 7 years ago when he first announced this car. It was, 0 to 60 in 2 seconds was unheard of. And then he created the Plaid, which beat that specification. Well, they continue to have to raise the bar on this car, and making it fly, go aerial is definitely one way to distinguish yourself in the supercar market. But you have some interesting stats. How's this possible? What does it really mean? Can it happen?
Yeah, I took some time to see whether or not it feasibly, from an engineering standpoint, could a Roadster fly. And I found a site called Scope Views. It's a more of a physics and engineering site. It's from the UK, so scopeviews.co.uk. And they asked the question, can a Tesla Roadster really fly? They took on the cold compressed gas, went through the math and physics of it, and basically came to the conclusion that Elon's not blowing smoke. In fact, I'll read their conclusion here. They said, yes, SpaceX cold gas thrusters really could make a Tesla Roadster fly. It could allow for 15 to 20 seconds of hover time and a slow drift across a car park.
That would be enough to get you to the parallel parking spot, maybe, right?
It would. It would get you to the parallel parking spot. If there's a place that's blocked and you think, yeah, I can make it in there, you could lift yourself up, move over, and sit down in that blocked parking area.
So the logistics of this now, for just a moment, we play this out. Okay, so you've used up all of your gas, right? And you got 15, 20 seconds or whatever. Now what? Is there a gigantic compressor in the car that's going to rebuild the pressure? If so, we've just bloated this car, right?
Yes.
And what does it run from? How many miles do you lose when it kicks on? Or do we now have compressed air at the Tesla superchargers? So you can get both a battery charge and you replenish your gas charge, right? Or your air charge or whatever you call it.
Oh, that's a great question. Or do they put something similar to some of these air compressors that are out there, some of the higher end air compressors like the rotary, the rotary ones where they just constantly are spinning, not a lot of power that they're using, but they're constantly pushing air in.
The scroll compressors.
Yeah, like a scroll compressor. I don't know, but it's possible, especially if you have the idea that driving down the road, you have a certain amount of air wind resistance energy that's coming at the car trying to slow it down. Are they capturing part of that energy and simply funneling it into a high pressure tank?
Yeah. Or heaven forbid, they go the Neo route and they have exchange for air tanks. So not only do you have to supercharge,
Wow.
but then you have to go someplace to get your air tank replaced for that 15 to 20 seconds of flight time.
That would be really interesting, especially considering the type of pressure they were talking about in these tanks. If you remember, it was something around 20,000 psi.
Yeah. And then you have another issue too, altitude. You know, that 20 seconds, if you go up fast, you're going to have to come down pretty quickly as well.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe SpaceX, which now has these recoverable booster rockets, this will be implemented in the car. But I think your altitude is going to be somewhat limited unless your vertical takeoff is extremely fast.
Oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. And or even the idea of a vertical takeoff in Los Angeles versus a vertical takeoff in Denver where you're at 6,000 feet.
Good point. Yeah. So we've got a whole host of questions for you, Tesla, and we hope you guys will chime in on this and begin to release some more information about how you hope to achieve this flying Tesla Roadster #2. And by the way, for those of you that are watching now, at 11 o'clock, we're going to shift over to the Tesla Roadster podcast, and that's usually where we talk about the first generation Roadster and what's going to be happening with the second generation Roadster. You know, there's a good question. Will the Tesla Roadster podcast that we do every week now begin to transition into including things about the second generation Roadster?
I think over time it probably will as more information comes out. Bearded Tesla on X also asks, what do you think it'll take to get more of Germany to get on board? Is it more from BMW, Mercedes, etc.?
You know, that's a darn good question because understanding the German mentality, first of all, they're very threatened by a U.S. company coming in and upsetting one of their primary revenue generating activities, which is machinery and automotive. They pride themselves on that. Yes, I think that more of this kind of release of product from the ones that they trust, the BMWs, you know, the VWs, the old Mercedes, you know, time-tested and proven companies would help. But what I noticed is there is a rapidly growing Tesla faction in Europe. There's a lot of frenzy about the brand and the car.
Mm-hmm.
The Cybertruck that they sent there, for example. I mean, these guys are getting all kinds of traction that are taking it around. There's a Tesla Club Austria and Tesla Club Bavaria, I believe, as well. I think the world is changing. And I'm hoping that, you know, these mindsets are altering along with it and that we lose some of this attachment to brands and nationality and, you know, patriotism, basically, to keep the EV community or the car communities monolithic in Europe.
I agree with you there. I also remember that BMW has their I series electrified vehicles, the i3, the i5, the i7, the i8, beautiful sedans. Mercedes is coming out with their EQS series. And they're all EV. However, they do tend to be on the higher end of the price scale, at least here in the States.
Mm-hmm.
Mercedes is especially ubiquitous in Germany. Are they going to come out with an EV that is more along the line of their mainstream for the masses type of cars that they sell in Europe but don't sell in the States?
Yeah. We've got from X, Captain Hype is joining us, and he says, "Hi, Pete. It was great meeting you in Flachau." And yes, likewise. And if you were there for my speech, I started my speech with, I would like to thank the group here in Flachau, Austria, for inviting me to this event. And then I said, did you notice that unlike the other guys that came with me from the U.S., I was the only one that pronounced your city correctly because I was born not too far from here. So it is not Flachau, or anything like that. You have to be able to use the German and the Austrian pronunciation. It's Flachau.
Yes, and I would have problems with that. Even though I have a German last name, I have not even been to Germany yet.
As word of German with the TH words.
Yes.
Captain Hype also says German legacy starts too late with EVs. and they still have to convince their hardcore ice bases and earn money with them. I'm sure that there is a difficult transition for the Europeans.
Yeah, I don't think that transition was made easier by Volkswagen. They've been one of the companies that seems to be really stumbling badly in their EV marketing and with what they did with the diesels.
Yeah.
To try to get them to be lower emission and cheating to take care of the test results.
But a brilliant move to align with Rivian at this point.
I think it is too. I think it's going to help both companies.
All right.
Well, I think that's
Okay.
about it for us for
Real
today.
quick, guys, before
Yeah.
we go, you got to talk about Elon and Trump. It's on the thumbnail and in the title.
All right. Well, my experience with Elon and the Trump interview, discussion, whatever you want to call it, was it didn't happen for about 45 minutes or so. And then finally, when I was able to get into something, it was all voice and I didn't see any video. And I shut it off after 5 minutes or so because it was the same rhetoric. Venezuela sent all their criminals to the United States. Their crime went from 72% down to something else. And it was just, but there were some more salient points discussed later, which I was pleased with. The thing I like best, well, maybe you have your views and then I'll go on to mine.
Okay, yeah, I didn't watch the interview live. I've done some looking up of how is the interview taken in the press, because to me, part of the entertainment of these interviews is watching how all the talking heads react. And you're going to have your very typical liberal press have their type of reaction, and conservative press have their type of reaction. I actually got through the 2020 election cycle to where I would look at more independent, non-US based publications to get some real perspective on it, because it seemed like nothing in the US was anything other than personal bias. And sure enough, I went to CNN, and one of their commentarists, he didn't write it as a commentary, but it really was just a commentary, just going off the rails about Trump is slurring his words, and Trump is the old guy, and Trump is the one that isn't going to have enough mental cognitive ability
yeah.
to do this. And then Fox News was touting how successful and how it's a turning point, and how great it was. To me, my take, 2 words: technical issues. Trump himself mocked Ron DeSantis early on in the primary cycle because Ron DeSantis had an interview with Elon Musk on X, and it was plagued with technical issues, and Trump absolutely just excoriated Ron DeSantis for those technical issues and said, "You've just lost your entire campaign." Well, the same thing has happened to Trump now, and I wonder what he's going to say about that.
Mm-hmm. The takeaways for me was that, let me get to this portion here. There we go. All right. Like Elon, I am a legal immigrant. I came here when I was 8 years old. Elon came, I don't know exactly how old he was, but the case that Elon made is one that I buy into. Not all the people that cross the border illegally are criminals. There are many good people that are coming into this country.
I agree.
I have friends who are married, and one of them is not a legal resident of this country. Wonderful people, though. So that was the first takeaway for me. And like Elon said, there needs to be a strong vetting process to prevent those that are dangerous from getting in.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I also ask is, all right, criminals are being sent by these governments to our country. Well, criminals are fairly smart. Once they get here, can't they simply go back if they've been forced to come here? Or maybe they like it here so much they stay. So those are questions that I have. And Donald says that he's promised the largest deportation operation in the country's history if he's elected. What are the logistics of that? How feasible is that? Like I mentioned, the friend of mine that has a wife and children, are they really going to rip this family apart? I don't think so. I don't think that the rest of us in the United States are going to allow this to occur. There would be some sort of a transition or some sort of method where this would be prevented, in my opinion.
We've already seen, here in Maricopa County, anyway, we've already seen what that could lead to. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Department was both accused, tried, and convicted, basically, of racial profiling, saying that the people who are here illegally are obviously Hispanics or blacks or Chinese or whatever. So they were stopping those races of people at an inordinate rate and asking for immigration documentation. Here in Maricopa County, it's one of the largest boondoggles that we've ever seen. They're $300 million in expenses and counting, for federal oversight to get the sheriff's office to be compliant with federal court orders. And the sheriff that did this has been out of office for 8 years.
Right.
And the county still has that. If this tried to happen on a national scale, you can only imagine the same types of things would be happening on a national scale.
Right.
I think it'd be a disaster.
Something else that was raised by Elon, which I agree with, he raised the prospect of creating a government commission to study the national debt and how Congress could reassess spending. Remember, if you or me spend more than we make, there's an expiration to our continuation of either mortgage, housing, cars, any of that. There's bankruptcy at some point. The federal government doesn't have those kind of regulatory requirements. And I think an independent commission, like Musk talks about, of businessmen or business people that would have some oversight, I applaud that. He says, and I quote, "I think it would be great to just have a government efficiency commission that looks at these things to make sure taxpayer money is spent in a good way. I'd be happy to help out with that commission," he says, as would I.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea. I'm a little skeptical of the political process. I remember, what is this now? Almost 20 years ago, Congress passed a balanced budget law that said for every dollar you spend, you have to take out a dollar somewhere else, and we're going to get to where we balance our budget. It was then challenged in court by people who wanted the government to spend money, preserve the status quo, etc., and the courts turned it over. I was really disappointed when I heard that, because the idea of spending more than you have is killing us as a country.
Well, that's what inflation is all about.
Yeah.
They realized that a couple thousand years ago when they first started printing money, and they thought, oh my God, just keep printing. Well, it devalues it. All right. Elon also said his views on climate change were that the country should not vilify the oil and gas industry. And the reason for that is it served us quite well for many decades, and it has contributed to our evolution. And yes, there is something underway currently, but it doesn't mean that, we need to vilify them. We should lean, he says, in the direction of sustainability. And it'll be interesting to see how the Trump administration, if it gets into, office, will handle this.
I guess my question for the people that want oil and gas to completely go away, is simple. What's going to replace your plastic bowls? What's going to replace your plastic laptop covers, headphones, TVs? What's going to replace that? And that's a very small piece of what the petroleum industry does for us.
And if we go back to organic, we're going to be cutting down trees like crazy. Remember when it was all organic, leather, trees,
Oh, yes. Leather, trees. And if you go back to metals, how many more strip mines are we going to have to open up?
Correct.
In order to facilitate all the demand for metal products that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Need hemp infusion. Just going to insert my little 2 cents there.
What's interesting is as soon as we got political, the audience declined to continue to comment.
Yes,
Did you notice
yes,
that?
I did.
And then finally, it looks like Mr. Trump is back on X, Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. I've been, the one thing that I've been surprised about with his commentary is how little I'm hearing about him posting on Truth Social.
Mm-hmm.
This is just me. I'm wondering, and it's just asking. I have no information to back this up. How long is True Social going to remain out there?
Yeah, good question.
I don't even hear about it anymore.
Well, I think we've had a good show. We want to thank all of you for joining us. And we'll be back next week with another edition of the Gruber Morning Show.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll see you in 20 minutes for the Tesla Roadster Roundtable.